Welcome to Freedom's Nest. This is Bill Jones from Freedom's Nest here at the Warfront, Illinois, brought to you by recapturefederalism.com and also Operation Official Misconduct.com. Going to be having a presentation, or maybe I'll just call it a report. I've changed my profile on Twitter to include war correspondent. And probably chuckling about that. I do. I'm probably the only war correspondent here in the United States reporting on the insurrection, the communist insurrection. Presentation today, this is a little introduction, and we'll get right into it. Which, of course, we'll do our oath. General Quarters notice. Topic today is the American Communist betrayal of U.S. vets. This is a personal video today. It's very personal, and we'll get into that, how personal it is later on. It involves my time in the United States Navy, 1965-1969, 1966, January 1966. I had come out of boot camp at Great Lakes. I was assigned to USS Wasp CVS-18 out of Boston, Massachusetts. Primary mission of USS Wasp, it was CVS, and the S stands for anti-submarine warfare. We went out up and down the East Coast and in the Caribbean as part of operations to hunt out and find Soviet communist submarines. They were the enemy at the time. They may not be the Soviet Union anymore, but we still have communist enemies. Mr. Putin, you can count on it, still a communist. The old KGB guy, he's not changing his stripes, is he? And then January 1968, I was transferred to Cecil Field, Florida, and the formation of a squadron, Attack Squadron 87. We had 87 bombers. Went over to Vietnam. And we'll get into that in detail because I'm going to start doing the history of Vietnam and the communists in Vietnam and in that part of the world. And the first thing we always do is take care of administrative business. Got to do the business first, and that's the oath. I, William R. Jones, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, so help me God. And as I always say, been keeping that oath since 1965, July of 1965, when I joined the Navy. To see the world, and what did I see? The Atlantic, it was frantic. Well, yeah, the enemy then was communism, as it is now. And what I mean by communism is a generic term to me. Those adhering to the Communist Manifesto and the guidelines of the Communist Party in 1921. That's what I mean by communist. Totalitarians, their political party supremacy, despotic, the whole thing there. And it's a lot easier to just say commie or communist. And that's what I mean by that. And General Quarters, all hands man your battle stations, up and forward to starboard, down and aft to port, set material condition zebra throughout the ship. This is not a drill, communist insurrection, General Quarters. Well, I'm going to get right into the Vietnam history, the communist history in Vietnam. You know, we had all these demonstrations. I'm going to be talking about demonstrations against active service personnel, military service personnel, veterans, and when we came back from Vietnam. Uh, but that wasn't the only time we had demonstrations. I had mentioned in the intro that I had been out of Boston. In 1966, we had demonstrations against us. we didn't come from Vietnam, and we weren't going to Vietnam. We were involved in the Cold War. You see, these communist cells not only were foreign, there we had communist cells, and we still have communist cells here in the United States. We had been out to sea, I guess, a week or two, out in the Atlantic looking for submarines, Soviet communist submarines. Cold War was going on then. And we came into port, and we were ordered that there was going to be a demonstration, and we were ordered to behave ourselves, that we were going to have to walk the gauntlet. In Boston, where we were at, was an Army quartermaster base. It was the big base that was used in World War II for shipping out troops and supplies to Europe during World War II. Across the street from the entrance to that Army base, and why was the Navy using the Army base? Because the carriers, the docks were big enough for the carriers. And so we would leave the base, and the enlisted men's club was across the street. Across the street, a big area there, it really was South Boston, was the first naval headquarters, the first district naval headquarters was there. And the enlisted men's club was over there. So we, you want to go ahead, been out to sea for a couple weeks, haven't had a beer or anything, wanted to have a beer. But first we had to walk that gauntlet. Demonstrations against us, anti-war demonstrations. Yet we had nothing to do with the Vietnam War. It has to do with the Cold War. For you see, the real truth of the matter is, there were communist cells which were demonstrating against the military, and that's what they do. It's part of their guidelines of the Communist parties, 1921. And so there we have it. Every time I hear Harvard, I get very suspicious of people who've been to Harvard, because part of that demonstration, the people that were doing it, were students and professors from Harvard University, which is, of course, located in the Boston area, and Cambridge to be exact, which is, I guess, a part of Boston. So here we were. It had nothing to do with Vietnam, but we were being demonstrated against, and we were evil people at war with the communists. See, and of course, the communist cell there at Harvard, they didn't appreciate that. We shouldn't be doing that. So, when we just talk about the betrayal of U.S. vets and American communists, it wasn't all about Vietnam either. But of course, that included that later on. It got more intense as it went along, but it was already going on in 65. 65 was the big push by the communists in the United States. They subverted the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement. Civil rights movement, by the way, is a communist movement. And when you hear about it, there's a difference between civil rights movement and human rights, basic human rights. The communists could care less about the American human rights of its citizens. They only care about one thing, and that's communism. Communism power, a communist system, totalitarian control of American society. But getting on over to talking about Vietnam, we have this, and Megyn Kelly of Fox News, and I love Megyn Kelly. I love the people over there. I just have problems with the way they operate. And I really I'll probably do a whole presentation on Fox, the problems I have with them. They're supposedly be our friends and what have you, but they're not very nice friends. Megyn Kelly, she did an interview with Ward Chamberlain, who's a communist. And prior to that, she did an interview with Bill Ayers. From Chicago, by the way. His father, by the way, was the head of Commonwealth Edison at the time of all his dealings. His mother was a left-winger, more than the father, I guess. I don't know. But she was a left-winger, and that's where he got all his inspiration from. Now, she interviewed him. Megyn Kelly did. And the interview that was done wasn't bad. It was a pretty good interview. The questions that she asked. And if you've heard me in the past, the next thing, and you know what I'm going to say, beware of what isn't said, what isn't asked. You know, and I'm going to get into the bombing in the Ho Chi Minh later because I was involved in that. Bill Ayers makes a statement. He had different figures at different times. If you've ever go on YouTube, you can see some of the stuff he said and talked about, days of rage and all that kind of stuff. But he talks about the deaths in Vietnam. 2,000 a day was one figure he used, and he also used 9,000 a week. And who were those people that were being killed? You see, this is the question that's never asked. It's never asked about the history of Vietnam and the communism over there. I don't think they hardly ever mentioned the word communism in the entire interview with Bill Ayers. It was all about communism. He was a communist. He is a communist. And he's associated with Barack Obama. And I've already done episode 1 of my mini documentary. Has to do, the title of it, Communist Obama, Like Father, Like Son. I did a whole, it's an hour and something long. All about that. He's a communist. They're communists. The communists are all over. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. The communists are. Now, he did Bill Ayers. And when I was over, we weren't bombing the North. Where were these people being killed at? A lot of them, they were on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was all communist, North Vietnamese communists on that Ho Chi Minh Trail, or slave labor, one or the other. That's what we were bombing. That's where the people were getting killed. Of course, there was some being killed in the battles of innocents being killed, collateral damage. And of course, I've heard him talk about collateral damage if some of the communists get killed. Well, that's collateral damage. But he said the propaganda is to say, oh, look at all the people you're killing. They were coming out down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They weren't crossing the DMZ for the most part. They were coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and coming in off the branches of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And you'll see that later on in some slides I have, which came off of a video, which I'll get into a little deeper there as I introduce it. I recommend watching it. It's about, I think it's 42 minutes long or something. And they showed demonstrations in there too. Now, that's one of the primary reasons I wanted to talk about it. Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Who is Ho Chi Minh? Ho Chi Minh was a communist. He received training in Russia in the 20s. Now, I talk about the guidelines of the Communist Party in 1921. That's what he learned over in Russia. Then went back to Vietnam. And he was the founder of the Viet Minh. Minh was named after him, the Viet Minh. The Viet Minh is the Communist Party of Vietnam. Now, since his death in September 1969, they've changed the name. It's now just the Communist Party of Vietnam. So that's, in 1930 he founds that party. Now, the question's never asked. If it was me interviewing him, of course, he'd never sit and have an interview with me anyway. I know too much about that slime ball. Now, the question that I would ask him, oh, we're so evil there in the 60s and 70s in Vietnam, and what are we doing there? We have no right to be in there, and blah, 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 propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. The fact is, the Communist Party was formed in 1930. The first American that was killed in Vietnam was an American U.S. Army lieutenant colonel by the name of Peter Dewey. In September of 1945, he's with the OSS. The surrender of the Japanese. Then there's a couple weeks later goes by the time of surrender, they form up and they have the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Harbor in early September. We've had VJ Day. A couple weeks after that, Lieutenant Colonel Dewey is ambushed by the Viet Minh men and he's assassinated. That is the first casualty of the Vietnam War, which hasn't even been declared or set yet. The French come back into French Indochina, and they're a colony. Okay, and I can understand somebody doesn't want to be colonized. We didn't either way back when. So there's a battle. Communist against the French colonialist. And they beat them bad, and there's a massacre, and I forget the name of it. But it's not important. They lost a big battle, and they decide they're going to leave out, and an accord is made, a settlement is made in Geneva. It's a partition. That's what they were doing back in the days from World War II. Partitions, the Iron Curtain, the Bamboo Curtain, and in Vietnam, and North Korea, and South Korea, and we had the Korean War because don't ever make an agreement with communists because they're not going to keep them. They never keep them. It's part of what I had learned in 1962 from a teacher, a civics teacher in high school. By the name of Ann O'Connor. I loved Ann O'Connor. She was my favorite teacher from high school. You know, we all have a favorite teacher. She was mine, involved in politics. I was already an anti-communist, and she taught me a lot. And I always remember, you know, she told me there's two major things. This is what the communists do. You know, yard by yard, it's hard. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. It sounds like the Iranians, doesn't it? Oh, well, anyway, here, that's the present day. We're talking about the past. And the other thing you talk about is two steps forward, one step back. And that's what they had done. That's what you do with the partitions. Because if you're a communist, you have no intention of keeping that forever. That's not a permanent agreement, treaty, accord. By the way, the signatories of that treaty was, or accord, it wasn't really even a treaty, at Geneva, was the French, Ho Chi Minh, the regime in North Vietnam, or what would become North Vietnam, and then the political folks down in the South. The United States was not a signatory to that agreement. We have no obligation whatsoever. We could have done whatever we wanted to do when it happened later on starting in 1959. We sent advisors down. We sent advisors into, and that's where the idea that the Vietnam War started. That's because we, at that point, sent people in. And they were advisors, you know, the Green Berets and Rangers. And some Marines were in there as a military. There weren't any combat units, so to speak. And it was mainly just advisors going in there. Military advisors to the South Vietnamese Army. And that went on and on and on until the Tonkin Gulf resolution and the incident with the Tonkin. By the way, that involved the ship that I was on in '69. USS Ticonderoga was involved in that incident down there. By the way, the incident happened. But the lie that was being told by McNamara was that it was unprovoked. I got news for you. The CIA and the United States Navy and the South Vietnamese Navy, we provoked stuff because we were involved in some stuff, and we should have been. We were involved in some stuff which was, and they were wanting a provocation. Oh, now we got a provocation. There was no, we didn't provoke anything. We didn't provoke anything, and so now we got to go in because they're nasty people. Well, they are nasty people, but why didn't you just be upfront about it? But no, that was our propaganda at that time. And that's how we got involved. But we never handled the case properly because it's really, in my opinion, I know people get upset when I say this, but we had our government, our civilian government was pro-communist, and we did not seriously want to take on the North Vietnamese and rout them and get rid of them because an agreement had already been made by FDR at Yalta. That's right. That has and still affects our foreign policy. It affected our policy in the Korean War. And what happens, and it's a betrayal. You're betraying the people you're sending over there to fight if you're not going to allow them to do what they need to do. So all the number of people, the 30,000 plus in Korea and the 58,000 plus in Vietnam, that number should have never happened. The war should have never happened the way it happened because it was mishandled, intentionally mishandled because of that agreement. Again, not a treaty, it was an accord between Stalin, FDR, Churchill, I guess the French were there too, and some others at Yalta. Of course, if you heard me before, FDR was pro-communist. I don't care what you say. Some people, at minimum, a socialist, and I've gotten into that. First a socialist, then a communist. And tampering with the court, and Social Security, seizure of gold, the whole thing. That's all communism. And now we're going to be talking here now. I've got some slides about the number of bombs that have dropped on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we got about, I think it's 6. I think I will say 7 because I've already done that part of the presentation. There's 6 slides, and then we'll get into, after those slides, I will get into some other stuff about demonstrations and the naming of Hamburger Hill. The screen captures I have and the one little clip I have is from a great video that you can get on YouTube, and I have a screen capture here at the beginning of it. The Vietnam Lost Films, this is the 4th or 6th, and it's titled Endless War, 1968-1969. And those that put it on, it's from Vietnam Lost Films, of course, is a series, and it was put on YouTube and produced, I guess, by the Winds of War. I assume that they're the ones with the copyright. Whoever has the copyright, I want to give them as credit. They are my source. The few clips I have are for educational purposes only, with no intention or will not be used in commercialization of any sort. We get money for it. I just want to use it. That's a great source, and I appreciate the work that they have done, and give them the credit that is due. And we'll continue. I now have about 7 slides of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. In the video, they describe the bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they do a pretty good job of what actually happened. I come from it now at a different perspective. At that time, I was on an aircraft carrier in 1969 at Yankee Station. Yankee Station, see this dotted line here by the A, that dotted line is the DMZ. Yankee Station is out here in the South China Sea, the Tonkin Gulf, and you'll notice the DMZ there, it is the narrowest space, and that's why the DMZ is there. It is the narrowest space in Vietnam between the North and the South. You will notice that the Ho Chi Minh Trail comes down, and I will have these these slides, and I will show that they show the bombing of it. By the way, in 1969, in March of 1969, that is when the bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail began in earnest. It would last for approximately 3 years until they started bombing North Vietnam again in 1972, I believe. You will notice the origin of the Ho Chi Minh Trail is in North Vietnam. It comes down through Laos and then in through Cambodia, and then the branches go into South Vietnam, a major supply line. But notice, as I go through the slides, there will never be any bombing in this operation, which was known as Operation Menu. There is at the origin. So we have a pipeline that is being bombed, which they work around and they patch up and they build branches around the damaged areas or repair the damaged areas. But the source is never bombed. So you have the pipeline which is being bombed, but in effect, the origin, the pumps and the valves and the faucets are never struck up here in North Vietnam. They are never struck. If you were to do that, it's shorter distance, by the way, for the naval aircraft off the carriers here in the at Yankee Station to go directly in to the origin of the bombing. The origin of the supply route. Instead, the United States Navy off the carriers comes down into the area down here in southern Laos and northern Cambodia, and you'll see in the depiction that's in the video that I'm pulling this from, the Endless Years, that all the bombings down there further, and that's why you had these battles down here at Hamburger Hill and 400 and 484. Part of what was known as Operation Apache Snow, that's what Hamburger Hill was. In that area, that's why you had those battles. Also, notice, and this is significant, there is never any boots on the ground north of the DMZ in large quantities. There were some of the bombing or the mining of the harbors in North Vietnam, and also I know of one or two cases, and there were probably more, of Marine recon crossing the DMZ and going into southern North Vietnam. But as we progress here in the slides, let me show what we have here. We have bombing. Notice there the DMZ again, and the bombing up here they're showing, and all the supply routes off of here and the branches coming in against the people of South Vietnam and the forces that we had there, and the South Vietnamese forces. They're coming in with supplies and attacking in all these places. Again, no boots on the ground north of the DMZ. We have, again, something would be damaged, they would work around it, correct, repair things, and can keep the supplies coming down. Again, no bombing in the origin. And we continue. Again, the same thing, farther down. This is southern Laos here. And coming into Vietnam, going all the way down. They'll go all the way down to the Mekong River Delta area. Farther and farther south. Damaged and then rebuilt. Damaged and rebuilt. This is the final slide I have of it. But you'll see all the branches. Again, where's the bombing of the origin? Up in North Vietnam. That would be the prime place to do it. But that was the policy at that time, which in fact was favoring the communists in North Vietnam. We have a screen capture off the video. Very interesting and enlightening statistic. We talk about the no bombing at the origin and the operation menu. But look at this about the bombing of Ho Chi Minh Trail. During the Vietnam War, 2.4 million tons of bombs are dropped on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Almost twice the amount U.S. Air Forces dropped in all of Germany during World War II. Well, if you're not bombing the origin, that's a lot of waste of bombs. What if they dropped all 2.4 million tons of bombs on the origin? That's where the bombing should have occurred. Instead, they wasted it. And there was, I believe, intentional. You know, you learn something new every day, they say. And even though I had been over there, we didn't at the time. All this we're talking about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That we on the ship there, and in the squadron, in the carrier Wing 16, the enlisted men and non-pilots personnel. We didn't know where we were bombing, what we were bombing, how we were bombing. We'd have a good idea depending upon the weapons that were on the aircraft when it took off, what they were going to do, where they were going to go, and what sort of target they were hitting. But we never knew where the target was. We had no business. We didn't care what the target was. We had our own personal mission that we had to do, our own job that we had to do. We did it. We were trained to do the job good, and we did it good. Very good. I had a job. I was a troubleshooter for aircraft up on the flight deck. And I was also what they call a cat checker. It was a final airworthiness inspector. Two-man team. Me and my teammate, Tommy Ellis. Yeah. We do the final inspection. Plane come up to the cat, and we look it over, make sure everything was right. It's either thumbs up, thumbs down. And we didn't care where he was going. It didn't make any difference. It wasn't our job where it was going. Our job was, it's either up or it's down. That was it. And for that, we get to be called baby killers. Yeah, the propaganda. And we're going to get into that demonstration right now. Yeah, I'll tell you all about it, how my feelings are being called a baby killer by communists. Oh yeah, the naming of Hamburger Hill. Yeah, it was done by the troops there. The troops American troops there. They named it Hamburger Hill because it was a meat grinder. Yet they'd go home and they'd be called a baby killer. For you younger people who might not be aware of what was occurring, I'm going to play about 50 seconds from the video, no sound other than my voiceover at this point. The man right there is asking a question, and I'll get into about, well, the president didn't tell us what we're doing over here. Well, enough other people should have known about it, and he should know it from some other people. This is a direct action against active military personnel. They are violating the law. I'll show you where there's a violation to the law, just like Jane Fonda and John Kerry. And that's what's going on here. People from communist cells, from universities, from schools, and news outlets, and it's all part of the communist movement, revolutionary movement. Okay, you saw a little clip, not long. It wasn't a long clip, but you get the gist of what was happening in that particular place, wherever that that was. I think you saw some in 1968, the convention here in Chicago. You've seen films of that. You've seen films of demonstrations. They're all over the country. It's not just one place, not just one university. It's all over. And why is it all over? Well, you go to page 34 of the Communist Manifesto. And I've got this slide up here. I'm going to read it. I've read it before. I do read it all the time. Almost every presentation I do, every mini documentary I do, every vlog I do. And now in this reporting, I'm going to do this. It's the base, one of the bases of the communist overthrow of the United States government and all the states. Overthrow of government. Advocating the overthrow. And now let me read it. Finally, they labor, and that's the English spelling, like from Great Britain, everywhere for the union and agreement of the democratic parties of all countries. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling class tremble at the communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their change. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. Page 34, Communist Manifesto. Let's look at that. Forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. This is from 1848, Communist Manifesto. In 1848, they are declaring that they can only be attained only by forcible overthrow of existing conditions. So they are declaring war, a communist declaration of war against all existing social conditions in all countries. They want to institute totalitarian control. They want to institutionalize human population control, okay? Slavery, that's what we have in the United States right now, slavery. And let the ruling classes, that's we the people, ruling classes tremble, that's terrorism. At the communist revolution. We have a communist revolution been going on here for 100 and some years, okay? They're terrorists. They be masters. And the civil rights movement is part of that revolution. And I can show you all I've done presentations before, and I can read it. I've got 90 some. I've been reading that stuff. It's boring to hear me reading their propaganda and all that. You want to read it? Communist Manifesto. You go to the Marxist.org. You can get this, and you also get the guidelines of the Communist Party's 1921. They're proud of their stuff. If you don't want to go through Marxist.org, you can go to the Avalon Project at Yale Law Library, Yale Law School. They're online. Avalon Project, great website. A little more free than the Manifesto. .org, and I mean by free, I mean not talking about money. They're all free. These communists want to spread this crap around all over the place. Yes, they do. I'm gonna talk to you now about the talking about insurrection all the time. You see my graphic that I have all the time, and that's what's going on. That was going back on the 60s, and before that, all the way back to FDR and back to the 16th Amendment. Back to a court case in 1895, Pollock versus Farmers Branch, where they declared income tax is unconstitutional, and that's where they come up with an amendment. A lightning bolt amendment, man. They worked it. The two parties worked that through. They wanted that money. That's what it was all about. It's all about greed. It's all about the 7 deadly sins. That's what communism is. Religious supremacy. Now, I've shown this before. I'm going to show it again. You had those demonstrators, and that's part of a rebellion or insurrection. It's a communist revolution. Okay. 18 U.S.C. Chapter 115. It's all about treason. You have rebellion or insurrection, 2383. Okay? And that's what you had. And that was rebellion and insurrection with those demonstrators. And the betrayal of active duty military. It's still happening today. The treatment, it's a little subdued. They like to do things subdued and in secretly because they're maggots. Now, you have that, and let's go to the next one, 2384, and this is seditious conspiracy. And here in this one is the hindrance and to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law in the United States. Oh, that's what they're good at. They're very good at that. They're very good at that. Oh, yeah, they will. That's how they do their things. A lot of people making money over this seditious conspiracy. Bankers in Hollywood and Wall Street. Yeah, there's money being made in this stuff, in the seditious conspiracy. And it's also a lot in the next one here, too. 2385, the news people, you know, the party press and media, advocating the overthrow of government. That's what those demonstrators were doing. Advocating the overthrow of what I just read out of the Communist Manifesto. That's what they're proud of. That's what they want to do. I'm going to show you how today. I'm going to show you how they do that too, with communist cells. They're supposed to register certain organizations, blah, blah, blah. They don't do that. They keep everything secret, and I'll show you that too. Activities affecting the armed forces generally. Okay, that's if not at war. But then you get the secret insurrection. Okay. Activities affecting armed forces during war. Bergdahl, he's going to be tried by the military tribunal, court-martial. He can also be tried in the civilian courts also. But, you know, Jane Fonda, good old Jane Fonda, looking good in her old age, isn't she? She should be looking worse, I guess. You know, that surgery does stuff. Anyway, I digress. 2388, activities affecting armed forces during war. Jane Fonda should have been charged and tried under this section of the law. And 20 years, okay? The America-hating, medal-tossing Mr. John Kerry, now our Secretary of State from the communist cell in Massachusetts, throwing those medals over the fence. That was activities affecting the armed forces during war. There's insurrection and overthrowing of the government. He should have been tried also. But they take care of their own. Commies take care of their own. You ever notice that? They take their own. If you haven't known that, I'm going to let you know. They take care of their own. So these demonstrators weren't charged either, and these people today, these news people, these ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, all of them, they're advocating the overthrow of government. And then recruiting for service against the United States, these people for ISIS and what have you. ISIS and communists, they're fellow travelers, okay? They're not the same, obviously, but they're fellow travelers. They want the same goal, totalitarian society, and that's what they do. So, and with that, hang on one. Here's the guidelines on the organization. You know, I had the Manifesto. Now you got the guidelines of the organization structure of communist parties on the methods and content of work. This is the one, and the last down here at the bottom, they're talking about a transition. You hear Obama talking, and Democrats talking a transitional period. They're communist. Their transitional period from the realization of socialism, the first stage of communist society. That's right. That's right. Whoops. Slide I have up here, I don't have the other one I wanted to show, but it's okay. I'll talk over this one right now because I'm going to get into propaganda and agitation. That's how they do what they do. That's how the media, that's how what they do, and I'll get into that. But in section 3, which is the previous section, you see on the screen right now, you see 20. Well, in line item 12, there's 4 paragraphs where they talk about the communist nuclei of cells. Let me read just one paragraph, give you some idea, and you can go back and read these sometime. Get yourself a copy. Communist nuclei are formed for day-to-day work in different areas of party activity, for door-to-door agitation, for party studies, for press work, for literature distribution, for intelligence gathering, communications, etc. That demonstrations I showed you, that clip, that's what that is. Now here's that section 4, propaganda and agitation. By the way, when I talked about Megyn Kelly at Fox with her interviews, had Ward Chamberlain, who was from the, I don't know, what was it, Colorado, one of those universities out there, and he got fired finally. He should have never been hired. He's a communist. He had a communist cell going at that university. Wonder how many other communists at that university, because most of the universities have communist cells. You might have to look for them, but they're there. They're there. They're well organized. The community organizers organize them. They're very good at their job. Very, very stealth, secret stuff. And the propaganda, they come out here and they talk their crap, like Bill Ayers. Megyn Kelly interviewed him, and as I say, more important, what wasn't said, and that's part of the propaganda. Lying by silence, deceit by silence, and that's what you have with Bill Ayers. Oh, she could have interviewed him for a week, talking about communism and communist cells and his work. She did mention some stuff. He did some bombing at ROTC. Well, yeah, they did bomb, but why don't you get in deeper? There's a communist cell there at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Let me tell you, they got a whole big cell there at Madison. Whole big cell there at Wisconsin, Madison. Now you got this propaganda and agitation. You see down there, there's a paragraph. Let me see. The most important aspect of communist propaganda is the revolutionizing effect of its content. Our slogans and positions on concrete questions in different situations must always be carefully weighed from this standpoint. Not only the professional propagandists and agitators, but all other party members as well must receive ongoing and thorough instruction so they can arrive at correct positions. Wow. I mean, they got this whole section here. This section 4. Boy, it sounds like the media, what the media does, doesn't it? Well, yes, it is. They're cells, too. And they do all that, don't they? In 21 down there, the first paragraph there, the last sentence of that first paragraph, every member of a legal or illegal party should in some way participate regularly in all this work. Legal and illegal. They're criminals. They're terrorists and criminals. Do you understand? You're not going to hear any of this from the media because they're a bunch of deceitful people, propagandists. Joseph Goebbels, he is excited in his grave. He has taught these people wonderful things on how to do it right from the Nazis to America. That's what you got. It's happening all over again. The enslavement, this time, is not of Jews and Germans. No, we got enslavement right here in the United States. Right here in the United States. And you know, we continue on. Well, here's the one I want to talk to you about. Let me see here. Well, I may have gone, let me find it here. Yes, It's the last paragraph in 21. Line item 21. In countries where national minorities form a part of the population, it is the party's duty to devote necessary attention to propaganda agitation among the proletarian labors of these minorities. This agitation and propaganda must obviously be conducted in languages of the respective national minorities. Appropriate party organs must be created for this purpose. That is where you get the term black, civil rights movement, gay, and on and on and on. All that demonstrating the slogans out there and the demonstrators back in the 60s and 70s up till now, and it will continue because you still got communists around here. You got more communists now than you've ever had. They're all over. They're even the NCAA now. My next one's gonna be about them and about ABC and George Stephanopoulos. Oh, it's gonna be brutal. It is gonna be brutal. I happened to have him turned on yesterday, listening to that crap. But I'll get into that. That's another presentation. I guess I had skipped ahead this slide here. 22. In conducting propaganda in those capitalist countries where the great majority of the proletariat does not possess conscious revolutionary inclinations, communists must constantly search for more effective methods of work in order to intersect the non-revolutionary worker as he begins his revolutionary awakening, making the revolutionary movement comprehensive and accessible to him. Well, that's nice of them? Isn't that nice of them? You will notice here's the attack on capitalistic countries. And then they pray and they get capitalists who have no principles and get them to become commie capitalist. And of course, the commie capitalists, they're not really capitalist anymore, I guess. Are they? But they're capitalists without principles, and they become part of the revolution that way. Why? Because of 7 deadly sins. They're making money. It's part of the confidence game. It's all a confidence game here. It's illegal. Criminals, like a shell game or a regular confidence game. They built your confidence to the non-revolutionary people, and then they turn them into good little commie cockroaches. Then in 23, the second paragraph, and I'm just reading parts of these sections. You should read the whole thing. I mean, it's boring to read all this, but but let me get to this. The second paragraph under line item 23. To achieve this, communists must take part in all the elementary struggles and movements of the working class and must fight for the workers' cause in every conflict with the capitalists over hours, wages, working conditions, etc. That's what it's all about. You see, this is class warfare. We are at war. There is class warfare, and all the chaos is what is being caused by the communist handlers, the communist leadership. And you know who they are. I've told you who they are. As I read before, the Democratic parties. The Union and Democratic parties. Union, Democratic parties, Democratic parties, Democratic parties. And the Republican Party is a Democratic Party. Now at 23, and you won't see it on your screen here, it's the last paragraph in line item 23, which is at the bottom of that bottom paragraph down there. And in the last sentence, only the leadership of the working masses in constant small-scale battles against the encroachments of capital will enable the communist parties to become vanguards of the working class vanguards, which in fact systematically learn to lead the proletariat to acquire the capacity for consciously prepared ouster of the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie, that's a French word meaning middle class. That conservatives, they also on page 31, Communist Manifesto, equate the bourgeois and conservatives. It's right there in the title of a area in page 31 of the Communist Manifesto. Battle. You hear the word battle, and here in the guidelines of battle, and troops, and struggle. There's a whole section on struggle. Class warfare. That is what you hear about all the time, and what they talk. And they're going to ouster the middle class. That's what they're doing. What do you think communist care, Obamacare, what do you think that is? That's the elimination of the middle class. You have no choice. We're going to force communism down your throat. Forced loans, progressive taxation, penalties, which is really taxation, all of that. In section 26, they have they talk about the proletariat, and about the bourgeois, the middle class, that they have to split away the supporters of the middle class, and they refer to them as social traitors. Leaders are lackeys of capitalism. And then the last, in the first paragraph of 26, therefore, where possible, these leaders must first be put into situations in which they are forced to unmask themselves. After such preparation, they can be attacked in the sharpest way. Again, this thing with religious freedom in Indiana, which will be my next presentation, that's what's happening. I did research for this one I have today. And chaos, I think I mentioned this in the previous presentation. I'm working on one thing, and the next thing there's another chaos. Every day there's a different chaos. And the media just covers that. Like a dead body. They got to go over the dead body, how he was shot and everything else. Well, they do that with this chaos stuff. Over and over and over. And then they wear it out. And then they forget about it. Well, I'm not forgetting about any of it. I've lived this stuff. I'm going to keep reminding people about it, about the way they operate. It's not very good. The last paragraph of line item 26, the cells and fractions must conduct their practical offenses systematically. Are you kidding me? When you talk about all the demonstrations, that's what that is. Offenses. Offensives. Yeah. They intend to have chaos. That's what they want. Class warfare, violence, chaos, disruption. That's the way they operate. Section 28, first paragraph there. First sentence, communists must learn how to be ever more effective in drawing unorganized, politically unconscious workers into the sphere of lasting party influence. Oh, man. Knock the dummies over the head and drag them into the party. Enlighten them on communism and the supremacy and political supremacy of the Democratic Party. That's what you do. The unorganized, politically unconscious. What they used to call those, I think they're still the same, useful idiots. That's where the term comes from. It's not in the writing here, but that's what they just described. Bottom of this paragraph there in 28, it's only, that particular line item is only one. They talk about youth and women's organizations can first around the interest in, yeah, that's what Michelle has been doing here lately. I saw something on her there. She talked to some group. And of course, she doesn't talk about all women. It's just women of color at that particular event. That's the way they operate, the language of the minorities. Yes, that's how they operate. Now we get into 30, and I want to, and this is directly related to the betrayal of United States veterans, those that serve, those that are serving, because this 30 is all about the military. 30, it starts for propaganda work in the Army and Navy of the capitalist state. A special study must be made of the most appropriate methods in each individual country. Anti-militaristic agitation in the pacifist sense is extremely detrimental. It only furthers the efforts of the bourgeoisie to disarm the proletariat. Yeah, that's right. They've got actions. They've got it all set up. They've been working on it. They've been working on it for over 100 years with the military. Sure they have. FDR and those bonus armies, and all, you see it all. You see it all. I want you to look very closely, if you can see in here, on the first paragraph in 30. Okay, the first paragraph in 30. Last sentence. Very, talk about gun control. You want to know about gun control? And why the gangs, street gangs, and the domestic terrorists in the United States have guns, and they don't do anything about it, but they want to control the guns of everybody else. And this is why. This is where this comes from. Right here, directly here. Listen closely. Every possibility for the proletariat to get weapons into its hands must be exploited to the fullest. There's your gun control. The communist troops are to have the guns. Everybody else is not to have the guns. That's how you control a communist society. And what do the communists think of the military? I'm going to tell you what they think of. They can. Let me read this. It's the last paragraph where it says the greatest vigilance. I'm going to read this whole paragraph. I know it's boring for me to read this stuff, and I prefer not to, but it's the only way I can, unless you should read it all, okay? But this is important. The greatest vigilance and incisiveness are always necessary in agitating against the bourgeoisie's special class war troops, especially against their volunteer armed gangs, where their social composition and corruption make it possible. The social decomposition of their ranks must be systematically promoted at the right time. If they have a homogeneous bourgeois class character, for example, in troops drawn purely from the officer corps, they must be exposed before the entire population, made so despicable and hated that the resulting isolation grinds them into pieces from within. Hello, demonstrations in that clip I showed you. That's what that is. That's what happened in the 60s and 70s. They got rid of the draft, didn't they? So when they talk about the volunteer armed gangs, that's what they're talking about the military after. That's their thoughts. That's what they've been working at since 1848. Since 1848, they've been working at that. That's what they think of the military. They look at them as enemies, which they are, of course. And the destruction of the military, the purging we've had of these officers. Obama's wants what his peeps, and he's people willing to go along with communism. Yeah, watch out for them. They're violating their oath, by the way. Watch out for them. When they order, if and when it comes down for martial law, it's an unlawful order. You do not have to follow unlawful orders. Uniform Code of Military Justice. And with that, we'll be signing off for this particular presentation, mini documentary, reporting. If you would, if you're somewhere where you're not at my site watching this, if you would go to my site, recapturefederalism.com, and if you would subscribe. You go to that site, like I say, you can see it on YouTube also, but my site, recapturefederalism.com, about 100 videos. This may be the 100th, I don't know, I have to double check, but 100 videos. And some of them, the quality isn't always that good. I do a lot of reading, and that was the basis. I'm trying to get away from that, and more a personal note on all this stuff, and it is all personal. I've been anti-communist for 55 years. So if you come and subscribe, we can let you know what we're going to be doing. I'm in the process of starting a book, and I'm also doing and in conjunction with that, probably still talking about doing a independent documentary. And That's into the future, but we can let you know what we're doing. We're going to continue to do it. We're going to be continuing to do these presentations because there's chaos every day. And you're not going to hear about this on the party press and the party media and Hollywood. Those people, they work with the commies. They're part of the communist revolutionary movement. Whether they're aware of it or not, they should be aware of it or not. Seem like they're mostly intelligent people operating without principle. That's it for now. Until next time, good day.